Good evening and welcome to City Limits, the show that provides you with information about the people, places, and events that shape the character of our community. Joining me tonight again is Gina Walsh, State Senator, District 13, right?
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Yes, District
Gina?
13.
I always got to remember that. 13 is usually unlucky, but it's been very lucky for you. And
Yes,
we're lucky
it has.
we live up here because you're our senator.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think that that North County has a lot of good leaders in it. You counted among that, and I have a lot of friends in North County that serve in public office, and I'm pleased to support them.
Oh, great. Well, we're going to continue. A couple of weeks ago, we did a show, and we covered the health and what else? We covered two things, health and...
We talked about education, I think.
Education and health, basically. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about transportation, a little bit about the state budget, a little bit about bills affecting municipalities, and then everybody's favorite topic now, since you're going to have to go back to Jeff City again,
Veto
the veto session. So let's start with transportation. A bill got passed that actually we're going to vote on it in August 5th, and
that is HJR 6068, and the purpose of that House Joint Resolution, it's an HJR because it started in the House. Senator Kehoe from Jefferson City handled it in the Senate. And the purpose of that constitutional amendment would be to impose a 0.75% sales tax, 0.75% increase in state sales tax and use tax for 10 years to be used to fund transportation. With that said, there's the pros and there's the cons of that, and that's why it's on the ballot. When we put something in the Constitution, it remains in the Constitution. And this will be a constitutional amendment. So there will be a vote of the people, and the people will decide if they want to impose a sales tax on themselves, a sales tax hike, to support repairing our roads. Now, the people that support this issue look to all the things that it will do, and it will do these things. It will create jobs, lots of jobs, because our highways and byways are in terrible shape. Our bridges are some of the worst in the country. They see it as a job creator. They see it as a win-win because it will create jobs and it will repair our roads, many which, as you know, you drive on them. You don't just drive around North County or St. Louis County. I see you up in Jeff City a lot too, working on behalf of the folks at Blackjack. So you know the condition our roads are in. Now, does the HJR, is that the right way to go? There's lots of other ways that we could have done this. A user tax or a toll road has been proposed, but this is the one that has moved through both chambers and was supported. I think that a sales tax will be a burden on some of the people who, I don't think people can afford any more sales tax. I look at my receipts when I go places. I shop in my community, and you know that over here in North County, people may not believe it, but our sales tax is reasonable and low. You go to some other areas, other municipalities, and it's way up there. You go over to Illinois and it's a lot higher. So I try and spend my money where I'm going to be fiscally responsible for the budget at my house. And that means, I think we talked before off air, I bought a coffee pot today. And I bought that coffee pot where I bought it because of the sales tax. I looked at it at 3 other places and I saved myself, and I had a coupon. So my coffee pot saved me, I saved quite a bit. My sales tax was $10 cheaper than it would have been somewhere else. And I had a 20% off coupon. And I think people are shopping like that now. A lot of the folks in my district, they can't afford it. They don't have cars. They take public transportation. They ride on buses when they go to the grocery store. It's a struggle to buy 15 years ago, you'd have never seen people at the grocery store using a charge card. I'd never seen that before. And now you see it all the time. And it's because of the economy and the fact that folks aren't making as much money, they don't have disposable income, and can you believe that we're talking about money spent on food being disposable income, but after you keep the lights on and you pay the house payment and then you go buy groceries. We have a lot of seniors and folks that just may not be able to afford this. They're making hard choices now between medication, prescription drugs, and food, and even doctor's visits. I had somebody say to me the other day, my knee's really bothering me, and I'm thinking to myself, like most people think, I've got decent insurance. I'll admit that through my employment, through my past employment, through my retirement. And he said, but I can't afford to go get a shot. And that's all he needed. He needed a shot in his knee to feel better. So we have a lot of folks out here like that. And these are our neighbors and the folks we represent. So we have to think about them when we're making those decisions.
Yep.
And I really think that, you know, a user tax of some type, I'd never like toll roads, because I think that is also a way to, you know, and people, when you think of toll roads, people think about all the big trucks that travel our highways. You know what? They're not the only ones traveling our highways. Our kids are going from one side of the state to the other for our universities and things like that. But other areas have worked those things out. You know, if you're a resident or whatever. I think in the Chicago area, they actually have a thing that when my daughter lived up there, you had a pass that was on your windshield. And
automatically trips as you go through the toll
right,
gate.
Yeah,
I've been up there. Yeah, we need, you know, I like you. We actually passed a resolution the other night concerning the transportation tax. And I personally would prefer a usage fee of some kind, whether it's gasoline or whatever, because then you get, you know, who's really using it. You actually pay to use the roads that you use by the usage fee.
And I've always looked at a lot of the sales tax municipalities. This is going to make it more difficult for municipalities to have a sales tax, because the city I live in, Bellefonte Neighbors, your city, gets a portion. You have a sales tax on that. So it's not just the state. There's other things, and it's going to make it harder for municipalities to, you know, and nobody likes taxes, but let's face it, Missouri is one of the lowest tax states in the country, and we have to pay for these services somehow. And the services you provide through your city have to be funded, and that's one of the ways that you do it. So this HJR is going to affect those things.
Well, we're talking about HJR and SB and HB. Let's just kind of go through what those acronyms are, because just maybe, you know, maybe some of the viewers don't know. So
okay, an HJR is a House Joint Resolution, and it's handled just like a bill, and it says HJR on it because it originates in the House. If it had originated in the Senate, it would have been an SJR. And any bill, wherever it originates, it starts there and goes through the process, which I'll do really quickly. The process of a bill, you know, a bill idea comes up, the bill is wrote, the sponsor sends a letter to whatever committee it's assigned to after the leadership in whichever chamber assigns it to a committee. You send a letter asking for a hearing on that bill. If you get a hearing, people come and they testify for or against your bill, or for informational purposes only. And then the members of the committee, you also ask them in that letter if they'll vote it out of committee, either up or down. If they should choose to keep the bill moving, they support the bill. Majority wins, so they send the bill on, and then it goes on to the calendar, and then it would go into that chamber for debate. And then that bill would have to go through the same process in the opposite chamber. So if it passes through whatever chamber it originates in, then it goes across the Capitol over to the other chamber, goes through the same process again, the hearing, the committee hearing, and then out on the floor for debate. Now, if it goes through that whole process on the other side of the building and doesn't change over there, it goes to the governor. If it does change, it goes back to the original chamber for their approval of the changes, the amendments that have been made to it. So you might have a House joint, that was a House joint resolution, there's Senate joint resolutions, there's concurrent resolutions that might have an S for Senate or an H before it, there's House bills, Senate bills, and the H and the S just stand for the Senate or the House.
And it's usually the H or the S depends on which
Which chamber it
started in.
originates in,
Right.
correct, yes.
Okay, so hopefully that clears it
Yeah,
up for everybody. 'Cause
yeah.
I've had somebody ask me that.
Yeah, that's, and it's all, I know when I was in 7th grade, I think, I still have it, 7th or 8th grade, we had to do a study of Missouri government. And we all learned that back then, but if I did the math, that was a long time in Senator Walsh years. So when I went to Jeff City the first time, it was a learning experience. But after being up there a while, it becomes rote again like it did when you were a kid.
Yeah, well, you look at it and you read about it, but
Sure.
when you actually live it, it's a little bit different too.
Well, because in the process does seem repetitive a lot of times, but we're writing laws that affect everybody across the state. So you want to make sure everything is vetted. You want everybody to have, and I've served in both chambers, and I've been in committee hearings when I was in the House where I thought people's voices were stifled, that they weren't allowed. No matter how repetitive it might sound to me when I'm in a committee hearing, we're affecting everybody in Missouri. I think anybody that wants to testify ought to have the ability to come up there and testify. And I see a lot of folks from here that I'm surprised sometimes that would have an interest, but they come up and they testify for or against certain pieces of legislation. And I think it's great. It's all part of the process, and that's how it should be.
Sounds good. The only problem with it is I have talked to you sometimes at night, way at night. These committee hearings are 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Well,
everybody thinks you go to work, go to work at 8, get off at 5. It doesn't work that way up there.
No, it doesn't, and that's all right. We all knew what we were signing up for. And I enjoy it. I like the interaction. People travel a long way to come and testify. And when a hearing is ended because somebody thinks it's long into the night or for whatever reason, if you live in the Boot Heel of Missouri and you've traveled to Jeff City, you're looking at a 4 or 5 hour drive, and then somebody shuts you down before you get a chance to even speak your piece. Well, that's out of line. Doesn't ever happen in the Senate. I've rarely seen that happen over there since I've been over there, and I don't know how things operate in the House anymore because I've been gone from there for, it's going on 5 years. But it's an amazing process to learn and watch. It truly is, and my friends will say, I should bring the kids up there. I say absolutely, especially your high school students should come up and watch the process. I've had kids shadow me. Those are some of the most fun days when I have high school students shadow me. It's a lot of fun, and they seem to learn a lot.
Sounds great. Well, encourage people to come up there.
Absolutely.
If viewers have kids or whatever, take them up there and see the session. Let's move on because we're getting close on time. We're really going through this far. Budget. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. Just a few comments about it.
I'm on the Appropriation Committee in the Senate, which is the Budget Committee, and there's two schools of thought. As you know, the governor has, I believe, he has broke his old record of vetoes, and he was fast approaching Governor Dalton's from the 60s. But veto messages. But he has vetoed a lot of bills, and a lot of them are due to budget constraints that the state is in. We did receive a report recently that money is not coming in as predicted. Therefore, a lot of the things that were funded in this next budget are not going to be funded, and the governor has either vetoed them or withheld the funding for them. And a lot of them are more than worthy programs, but they are not things that keep the lights on. And we need to do that in the state. By law, we are required to fund education. That's one of the first things we have to do as legislators, and we have to present a balanced budget. So if the budget doesn't balance, this is the end result of that. And there's been a lot of bills that he's vetoed strictly because there isn't money to support those programs. And I had some things that I worked on this year that have been vetoed that I was disappointed that they were vetoed, but I do understand, you can't pay for it with air.
That's true. You can't print, Missouri don't print money, right?
No, we do not. We do not.
That happened years ago. Okay, so it'll be decided, I guess, I know we're going to talk about the veto session a little bit, but in the veto session, will they decide whether to go ahead and fund that or how to fund it?
Well, it's just, some of the things that he withheld after the veto session, depending on what happened, may be, he may let loose of some of the money. I don't know. But he has to have money there to pay for the services we are required to pay for. One of the things that I know was cut was a reentry program for prisoners leaving our prison system. And it's a very good program. But that budget was completely eliminated. It was grants. It was, I think, 5 or 6 grants. And I got a call about it the other night. And I thought it had been funded. Well, it was, but the governor vetoed it. There's no money there for it. So
they'll have to make a decision.
They will, these organizations that do these, because these aren't state organizations that help these folks that are reentering society after they've paid their debt. These are not-for-profits that do these things, and a lot of them rely on these grants and fundings that they receive from the state and federal governments to keep afloat. And I think one in particular, I can't even remember what organization it was, but I think over 80% of their funding came from grants. So that means that their lights will not be kept on. But nobody is denying that they are not worthy programs. They are extremely worthy and very helpful. They save money in the long run. They prevent repetitive repeat offenders. They do a lot of good things. But it is the times we live in. And maybe if the tax bill is not overrode, if that tax bill doesn't move forward. But that's a big cut. You know what it's going to do to your city.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's a done deal. That's gone through. We overrode his veto on that in May, I think, last week of session. But there's several other bills that will be up there as far as sales tax and different things. It's going to hurt these areas here that if we don't sustain his vetoes and they go through, we can't ask on one hand to increase taxes, HJR 68, and then on the other hand, initiate one of the biggest tax cuts in history. And that's right now what the legislature is asking the citizens of Missouri, asking of them, because we've initiated the tax cut. And that tax cut in my household, it would have saved me $30 a year. Now, that $30 my kids are going to get out of my purse to go to McDonald's. I'm not going to miss that. Will the state miss it? Absolutely. It's something that could have gone to different services that we so desperately need, like reentry programs or education.
When you think about $30, somebody says, well, it's not very much money. But as you aggregate this among millions and millions of people, it really does add up to a considerable amount.
And I don't like to diminish it because I've been there. When I was young and what they call your salad days, $30 was a lot of money when you're, a young couple raising kids, and it's a year. But if it's a month or a week, $30 is a big hit in your budget sometimes. And it is for a lot of people now. So I think sometimes we don't often think about other people, how it affects them. Kind of like walk a mile in their shoes. If you don't know that there's folks out there that need this help, you don't always think about it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let's talk about municipalities a little bit. There were several bills about municipalities this last session. And one of the ones that always aggravates me, I don't know why they do it, and I don't know if it was in the Senate or the House, had to do with ethics reform. And that's always by the, what's it, Newspaper Association or Publishers or Missouri Press Association. They usually put in, they always want to do something to the Sunshine Law. And it's always very detrimental or very, very far-reaching. And you look at, as a municipal leader, and, I'm active in the Missouri Municipal League and St. Louis County Municipal League, so I would know if there's any issues with some cities doing things, and you never see any, but every year they always put something in. Why do they do that, or do you have any idea?
It's not one of my bills. I know there are always several bills on ethics reforms, ranging from campaign finance to the Sunshine Law. And I think all of those bills have, the Sunshine Law bills have, are well intended. But I'm not an attorney, and they all sound really good when you're reading them until you talk to somebody about how the laws themselves are written and how it will affect your municipalities and how they operate. The Sunshine Law is there for the folks to make things crystal clear so that anybody can get information out of their local government or their state government, for that matter, that they want to get as far as information. And I believe that the Sunshine Law also allows the state government or the entity that the request is being made of to charge a reasonable fee for the information that somebody might be requesting.
That's true.
But, I often wonder sometimes, the people that you hear from that are sometimes sending these requests, they're politically motivated instead of ethically motivated. And I can't say, I can't say it any clearer. And I don't know that that's necessarily why those laws are drafted and why they're out there. But
well, see, from my perspective, as I look at it, we have open records. I mean,
right.
We comply 100% with the Sunshine Law. No problem with it, and I agree with the thing, okay? But the way they always make those proposed laws, the municipalities are guilty of something until they're proven innocent.
Right.
And it just makes no sense to municipalities why they do that. I mean, historically, it's the House, it's not the Senate. I've never seen one come out of the Senate, but it is the House.
And they say that, and that might be. I don't know if it ever gets past us, because I don't recall anything like that this year.
Yeah.
And that's not to mean, that's not to say that some of those things aren't buried deep in some of the bills that we did pass, because that happens a lot too. And that's another reason why the governor vetoes a lot of this stuff, because he'll say, well, yeah, you have a bill that does this, but did you know on page 1300 you were doing this? Well, somebody knew. Maybe not necessarily everybody in there.
I don't know what they called the one bill. They have one bill up there all the time in the House that they had put hundreds of things on at the very end.
They call them omnibus bills.
Omnibus bills, okay.
And they they usually die from their own weight. Mm-hmm. And a lot of good things die in those bills.
Yeah.
There's always an omnibus education bill, and legislation I had in the House. I had the law that you have to leave your headlights on when it's raining out. Mm-hmm. That was my bill, and it was attached to an omnibus transportation bill my second or third year in Jefferson City. And the bill actually came from a constituent that was a Teamster that drove these big trucks. And in Illinois, they had the law for quite a while, and I was working over there, and you'd see signs that say headlights must be on during inclement weather. And it was a safety measure, because they really can't see, those big trucks cannot see cars when it's raining, and they can't see them in their blind spot. Mm-hmm. But when it's raining, it makes it even worse. And the color of the car plays into it. They say white and gray cars really impede their ability to see those vehicles. So the headlights on in inclement weather helps. And that was something that was attached to an omnibus transportation bill.
Well.
And it was handled in the House in the Senate by Senator John Dolan when he was in the Senate. And I remember that bill because I worked hard on it. But that one got through. And a lot of things that go on in one chamber or the other might be stripped out in the other chamber. And then it goes through a process where a small committee from both chambers get together and say, can you live with this? Can you live with that? This is coming out or this is staying in. And those are called conference committees. And that is when you go fight for your stuff. If you have something in there and you're lucky enough to get on the conference committee, you might have a good chance of keeping your legislation intact. If not, you can
bring it back next year.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right, and that's what happens. It takes 3 or 4 years for a bill really to become law. I worked on a bill that was signed into law last week. I had it the last 2 years. I had it, and I had something similar, but not exactly like it in the House. But it finally was signed into law. Yeah. So it wasn't, and it does not look like it did when it started out.
Yeah.
So, but it's a foot in the door, and it's a good. It was my meningitis bill. It requires meningitis vaccines for kids going away to school, living on college campuses in close quarters, and it was signed into law by the governor last week.
Well,
so,
congratulations!
Yeah, I was
Good deal.
really pleased to hear that.
All right, we've got about 2 minutes here. Let's talk about the veto session.
Let's
Which
talk
is about what
it.
it's going to take for the veto session.
Yeah,
right?
it's gonna take a long time. I think
Yeah.
this is gonna be compared historically. Other veto sessions have lasted maybe a day or a day and a half, and I think this is gonna run its course. It's gonna be a couple of 3 days or better because there's a lot of bills, over 30 bills. I think the governor's vetoed, and we have to decide whether we're going to support them or override them. His veto, that is. So the municipality bills, the bills you were talking about that affects municipalities, I think every one of those were vetoed.
They were, yes.
The education bill, that's going to be a big one. That was vetoed. There's laws relating to payday loans. Those were vetoed. Tax liability laws were vetoed. There was a bill relating, if you've seen those things, and they're not cigarettes, but they're like electric cigarettes. Yes.
E-cigarettes,
There's a bill relating to that was vetoed. So I'm looking at this list right here. There's 2 bills, one right after the other, both Senate bills that were, they modify provisions relating to taxation. So there's several tax bills in here that were vetoed. There's one that he vetoed that was, it eliminated a bunch of existing duplicative laws. One law does something, well, then how does it affect that law? A lot of those things were that he vetoed that bill, but there was some stuff in there way back on page 1300, that shouldn't have been in there. And as senators, we have our staff. The governor himself is an attorney, and he has a battery of attorneys that sit and they review every one of these bills and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So, if you have something in there, if I have something in somewhere, I own up, I have my legislation there, and I don't have a problem telling anybody it's in there. And they tell you up there, don't marry a bill. If you really, you don't want to hold on to your legislation so dear that you lose sight of what you're supposed to be doing there, because, the most important thing is we represent the people. And if those bills don't pass, but you're still helping people, that's okay, because the people are the more important thing.
Well, from my perspective, I wish I could talk a few senators and representatives into divorcing their bills.
I have been talked into that before.
As we wrap up here, thank you very much, Senator Walsh.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And you give us a good insight into all this stuff. After the veto session, I'd like you to come back to a half-hour show of the Walsh Report.
Okay,
Because
we'll do that.
we've been doing those sporadically, and
All
we'd
right.
like to
Yeah, we haven't
get
done
you
it
to
in a long time.
host the next one, and it'll be your show, and you can have whatever guest you want.
All right. Thank you,
Fair
Mr.
enough?
Mayor.
Thank you, Senator.